All right, welcome back to Team O'Neill. I'm Wyatt.
I'm Dan.
And what we're gonna look at today is tire sizes.
Learning how to read your tires and the sizes that are written on them, right? And when we change those tire sizes, how that affects our car.
Most people make tire size decisions based on kind of the aesthetic of what it's gonna look like on your car. But for performance driving, for high-speed driving, for really on the street, you need to know what these changes are gonna do to your vehicle. So we're gonna look at making tires wider or narrower, taller or shorter, changing our sidewall a little bit, and what that's gonna do on the road.
And even if they fit your vehicle.
Yeah, and even if it's an option. So that's why we've got Dan in the shop here. He's an expert with this stuff. He's currently racing and playing with different tire sizes. So Dan, walk me through how to read normal tire sizes and what sort of the basic numbers mean when you're looking at tires.
Yeah, absolutely. So with this tire here, this Yokohama truck tire, we have 265 for the width, right? That shows us the width of the actual sidewall of the tire, right? Not even where the tread pattern is.
In millimeters.
In millimeters, correct, right? And that's right from the sidewall to the other sidewall. The next number, 75 on this tire, shows a ratio of how wide the tire actually is to how tall the sidewall is. Now 75 means that 75% of this width we're going to take and make into a sidewall, right? Making this tire very tall, right? And a big sidewall with 75 there.
So if it's 265 millimeters this way, it's 75% of those millimeters this way.
Correct. This is why I'm making this style of number a little bit more confusing to begin with, right?
They could have just put millimeters in sidewall height there, but that would have been too easy.
The last number, R16, easy one, shows the rim size or the wheel size is 16 inches.
And then we do see some tires that are labeled like this. What's going on here?
So this one, another truck tire, right? This Yokohama is listed 31 by 10.5, and that's a lot simpler. It's actually 31 inches tall overall, and then 10.5 wide, sidewall to sidewall. So a little bit simpler to read that way. Not a lot of tires listed in this, usually bigger truck tires, tractor tires, that kind of thing. You'll find most tires are listed in the metric fashion here, like we were just going over.
So the first consideration looking at tires is going to be the width of the tire, and what we've got here are a couple of 185s, a 195, a 205, a 215, a couple of 225s, a 235, and a 245. What you're going to find is even within the same width range, these are both 225s, you're going to have a very different contact patch on the road. So why is that?
So we look at here at a kind of performance summer tire and a snow tire or winter tire for the same vehicle, maybe with the same tire size. If you look at the actual tread width, right, we just measured this one at a 225 wide tire, I'm only seeing about 19 centimeters or 190 millimeters wide on the actual tread. Whereas this one, you're almost to where it actually says, right? We're at kind of 21 centimeters wide for 210 millimeters, right? So you're almost the advertised sidewall width. In the summertime, you want as much tread width as possible to get all that contact patch on the good pavement for lots of grip and stability. In the wintertime though, right, we want to cut through the snow a little bit better, right? A little bit narrower tread pattern. Lets you cut through the snow and slush, kind of like a saw blade or something, right? Getting through that snow, getting a little bit deeper through the snow might find a little bit harder packed material, maybe even the pavement, something like that, right? You want a lot more pressure on a smaller space for more traction.
If your vehicle comes stock with pretty wide tires out in the snow, these really aren't going to perform very well. Like we just said, they're going to float around and skid around and you're going to be sliding all over the place. So a lot of drivers make a conscious choice to go with a narrower snow tire.
Right, you go at a 225 here on a vehicle and go down to something like a 195, right? Again, you're getting a lot smaller contact patch, but like we were just talking about, we get a better grip level here with the smaller contact patch on the slippery snow and ice and everything like that. Now, something else to think about is if it doesn't snow too much in your area, going down a size like that is going to provide less pavement grip, right? These tires being a lot smaller aren't going to be able to maybe handle the weight or the hard cornering or braking on your pavement grip, right? Same can be said for adding studs to your tire, right? You get a little bit more grip on ice, but less grip on pavement. Smaller contact patch, smaller tread width is not as stable maybe on that higher grip.
Yeah, on snow, you would maybe transition from wide to narrow intentionally, where on pavement, it might make more sense if you'd like more grip on the pavement to transition from a narrower tire to a wider tire. All right, Dan, so say my car came with these 205s and looking for more grip, say I was gonna go out on the track, I wanted to put these 225s on it. They're about the same height, but what kind of problems am I gonna run into trying to mount these tires on this car?
Something you gotta look at is, with the width of the tire, is the width of your wheel, right? A wheel of this size might fit on your standard wheels in your cars pretty well, but a little bit wider tire might be hard to mount right on there. Right, wheels and tires are kind of matched to their width, where the actual width of the tire for the bead. The other thing you're gonna look at is when you put this wider tire on, the way your car was designed was for this smaller tire. You might not be able to fit this within the fender or with the suspension, how it is, right? The clearances on these things from one to the other might be not enough to fit this bigger tire, right?
So once you've determined what width you'd like for the vehicle that you've got, the next thing to look at is the sidewall, aka profile, aka aspect ratio. You know, how thick do you want the sidewall of your tire? What are a couple benefits to, you know, thick tires and thin tires as you're driving along down the road?
Yeah, so with a bigger sidewall on your tire, right, it actually adds a lot more comfort to your ride. With all this rubber and all this material for moving around, right, it absorbs bumps a lot better. And it just makes a quieter ride usually and a smoother ride. With the narrower aspect ratio, we add a lot of performance, right? On the dry pavement and pavement in general, you add more grip and more stability to the tire. It has a lot less flex in it, whereas this one has a lot of flex in it, being a lot bigger sidewall. So if you're looking for something more performance oriented on the pavement, right? A little bit smaller ratio here. But then we're looking again, right? You reduce ride comfort, right? As well as we add, you know, say a bigger wheel for a smaller sidewall here. We add the risk of breaking these wheels or breaking this tire, right? Popping this tire. We have a lot less rubber to absorb these bumps, so we have a lot, maybe less reliable tire if you live where it's kind of potholy or rough, that kind of thing.
Dan, if I'm driving around with these tires, what's it gonna feel like? What's the performance advantage? What exactly is going on? If I go from this tire to this tire or back and forth between these two, what's actually gonna be different behind the wheel?
On the tires that have more sidewall, right, more tread blocks, it's gonna feel a lot more floaty, right? With your steering response is gonna be a lot more delayed comparatively, where the tire has to flex before it actually grips. With the less sidewall, there's less to flex, more grip, feels better on the steering wheel, right? You can actually feel on the grippier tires that it tries to follow the road and all the imperfections, where this kind of just smooths it right out. It helps with braking and acceleration as well, right? Less flex in this tire is gonna be a lot quicker response on when it brakes and when it actually tries to accelerate, right? Again, a little bit more grip with this, where this has to move around a lot more to actually grip up, right?
You've seen probably the slow motion drag racing tire where they intentionally have that sidewall flex built in before they go to sort of slingshot them off the line, which is cool. But in a real, you know, normal sports car driving or, you know, any track days or racing or stuff like that, that flex in the sidewall, accelerating and braking and steering, it feels a little gummy and sort of delayed and disconnected behind the wheel, where a lower profile tire like that is going to be more direct and immediate.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot more direct in your weight transfer from one side to the other, right? Where this adds kind of more like suspension flex, right? Like you have less sway bar in your car or something, right? Where it's a lot more...
Or a softer spring.
Or a softer spring, yeah, same idea, right? A lot more lean with the actual tire and lean with the car.
More body roll. Your sidewall is the front line of your suspension. You know, that few inches of squish and softness in this tire is going to be felt by you in the vehicle, where a hard tire like this is going to feel like you've got slightly stiffer springs or slightly softer springs. There are ways to combat that. You know, we're just looking at sizes, but be aware that, you know, there are heavier duty tires, whether you've got LT rated truck tires for carrying weight, or of course rally tires. There are massively heavy duty tires that do not flex and will keep your suspension feeling really stiff and strong. So as you're choosing tires for your vehicle, you've got the width you know you'd like for the kind of driving you're going to be doing, as well as the thickness of the sidewall. The next thing to look at is the overall height. And what you'll probably see is all of these tires are different sizes, but they're all relatively the same height. So to calculate the overall height of your tire, it's way more difficult than it should be. There's plenty of good online calculators that do this, but essentially, if you've got a 215/65 R15, your tread width's 255, your sidewall height is 65% of that. So you need to calculate 65% of that 215 times 2 for the top and bottom, add your 15-inch wheel, convert that to millimeters, total it all together, and that's how you're gonna end up with your height.
I do it online. This is especially important when you go and try to change maybe your wheel size, right? You want to move up to a bigger wheel. Your aspect ratio for the same width tire is going to change wildly, right? So looking at the calculator online, or you know, kind of getting a judge of how much aspect ratio you need to reduce for that bigger wheel to have about the same diameter tire. Now they're always not going to be the perfect right amount diameter, right? It's always going to vary slightly because of it's a calculation of a percentage and not an actual direct measurement, right? But ½ inch here of diameter, taller or shorter, right? It's not really going to affect how your car drives per se outright. It's not going to affect it greatly to harm it or anything like that. This video is going to be like,
yeah. All right, so Dan, let's say I've got some shorter overall height tires and I decide that I want to mount some taller tires. What's going to happen?
so yeah, you might want to mount some taller tires for either the winter or for if you run on rougher roads usually. Adding a bigger tire adds a little bit more road comfort, right? With small potholes and stuff, this tire might roll over it, or a smaller tire might roll right into it and add to that jarring motion, right? With the bigger tire, you are gonna maybe lose a little bit of miles per gallon or throw off your speedometer and your odometer. And being bigger in general just adds a little bit of weight, right? You go from, you know, especially on trucks or something, you go from a standard tire to a big off-roady tire. Not only is it gonna be a stronger construction, but being bigger in general, just it's gonna be heavier.
To look at what's going to happen to your speedometer and odometer, if you have a taller tire, your speedo is going to read lower. And if you have a shorter tire than stock, your speedometer is going to read higher. And that's because a short tire covers less ground in one revolution than a taller tire.
Right. This is something that on the online calculators, they can actually show you how off it will actually be, right? Kind of give a, you know, this one's going to be 2-3 miles an hour at 70 miles an hour slower on your speedometer than the one you maybe has that's bigger.
For the purpose of this video, we're not looking at making dramatic changes, but you could imagine, you know, if you take a stock Jeep Wrangler and go put 37s on it, your speedo and your odo are going to be dramatically off from stock. One other thing, you know, off-road guys and people who are driving on rough roads and bumpy roads like the bigger tires because they roll over obstacles. But what else happens when you mount taller tires on your vehicle?
A little bit taller tire, you give a little bit more ground clearance to the car, right? With a little bit taller tire, the car has to sit a little bit higher. Better for, you know, deeper snow and, you know, rougher roads and things like that.
So presumably the opposite could be said. If you put smaller tires on your car, what's going to happen?
So with shorter tires, you get a little bit less ground clearance, right? It adds to the performance of the car with a little bit better acceleration and maybe some looks to the car, but we add a little bit less ride height, right? So if you're in the rougher areas or something, something to look out for where you might be hitting, you know, the bottom of your car a lot more often. But if you're on a lot smoother roads, right, it's not something to really worry about.
Okay, Dan, so let's say my car comes with tires this size and I decide to put these bad boys on it. How do I figure out what to do with my tire pressure now?
So your car and your manufacturer of your car is going to give you kind of an idea of how much tire pressure to put in the tire for a good, safe and good car tire with the pressure inside. As you change it, you know, kind of dramatically here, you might end up changing the pressure, right? Depending on how the car feels. If it feels a little bit more floaty, a little more squishy, right, you might have to add a little bit more air to it than they might say to beef up that ride, right? And when you're changing kind of the sidewall size here a lot, right, you go from a smaller sidewall to a bigger sidewall, you might end up changing it the same amount, right? With the smaller sidewall, you have less to actually move. You might want a little bit more air in it so we're not kind of hurting the tire, right, on rougher roads and things like that. But again, with a bigger sidewall in here, you have a little bit more squish, but maybe too much squish, right? It all depends on the car you're in and the tire you're running on. It's really more of a feel thing as long as you have enough air in your tire, somewhere around that recommended range. You're not really hurting it one way or the other.
One other thing we've all seen out there is cars that run different size tires front to rear. Some are wider, some are taller. So what's going on? Why would you want different size tires on the front or back of your car?
Yeah, this is something that's called a staggered versus square setup on a lot of performance cars or some performance cars. Usually with the driven wheels, say like a Corvette that's rear-wheel drive, it's going to have bigger, wider, fatter tires on the rear than it does on the front for all the power it has to put down through those drive wheels, right? The front's going to be a little bit smaller because there's less, weight or less grip needed up there, right? So we're looking at, with a two-wheel drive vehicle like that, they don't have to be exactly the same size because they can roll at different speeds to have the car go at the one speed, right? Something like an all-wheel drive vehicle is going to have usually a square setup where all four tires are kind of the same size, same wheel size, all that, because they all have to actually turn at the same speed, being all connected together. Right, and you see opposite of the rear-wheel drive, the big front-wheel drive drag car has huge front tires and tiny little skinny rear ones for less resistance because they don't have to spin at the same speed.
Yeah, you touched on something really important there with all-wheel drive cars. What's going to happen to me if I do put a smaller tire on the front of an all-wheel drive or put a little donut spare I found on my Subaru to get home or something like that?
Yeah, for short distances, and people worry about this, when they do the spare tire thing or something. For short distances, it's really not going to break anything outright. Obviously, I wouldn't go put a donut on here and a huge truck tire in the back and try to do a bunch of donuts, right? The variation of speed from one to the other is going to be very hard on the driveline itself and wear out kind of the components within. So for a long amount of time, I wouldn't run different size tires on the car, right? This is where it becomes a little bit of an issue. If you have a blowout like that, usually you end up buying 4 new tires, right? A little bit more expensive that way, but at least you won't wear out the more expensive components inside the car. Small variations, a couple 30 seconds on the tread wear is not going to hurt it very much, right? But this is why people like to rotate their tires on all-wheel drives, more importantly than two-wheel drive vehicles.
One last consideration that's really just more of a sanity check. Once you think you've got the right tire, it's the right width, it's the right sidewall, it's the right wheel size, everything's pretty happy, is just to take a look at the weight. Because again, going into more high performance stuff or making big dramatic changes, if I take this tire off and I put a rally tire on or an off-road light truck tire or something, what's that gonna make my vehicle feel like?
Yeah, I mean, with a stronger tire, like a gravel tire, or for the larger truck tires or something like that, right? They're just going to be, in general, heavier, which is going to affect absolutely your performance and your, acceleration and braking, because, a more unspun weight, more rotational mass, it's not going to want to move, right? So even to the street performance style, right? A much, much larger grippy tire like that might be overkill for a car because it's a little bit too heavy and the car can actually turn them fast enough or strong enough to move forward, right? Especially with something like a gravel tire where, you want a big gravel tire for lots of ride height and all this, but your car can't actually turn it, right? Or slow it down very easily.
Yeah, especially with, hey, a Fiesta like this, if you put on heavy gravel tires and heavy gravel, off-road biased wheels, that whole package is going to end up being double the weight almost of, the recommended street car package. And that does affect your acceleration, your braking, the longevity of the parts of the vehicle, your suspension.
Your suspension might not be built to have that weight tax. And looking at, especially going from a smaller wheel to a bigger wheel or something, a bigger wheel can be heavier unless you get something like a lightweight wheel, right? Rubber is actually not that heavy, right, compared to how heavy the wheels are. So you go to a much larger wheel from some other vehicle, it could be a lot heavier overall package because of how, despite being the same size, could be a lot heavier because of how heavy the wheel is. That's why a lot of performance wheels, right, that are bigger are very light.
So that's just a sanity check once you think you've got the right tire for you. A sneaky way to do that is you can usually find online the weight of those tires or just check the shipping weight if you're ordering them online, and you'll be able to see how much that package is going to weigh divided by roughly 4, and that's about what that tire is going to weigh. Hopefully that's just a good primer how to read the sizes of your tire and then how to choose the right size for you.
Something when you're looking at tires and wondering what kind of size you can fit, how big, how small, how wide, usually forums and internet groups have really, for your car might have figured out what fits what, right? And what's good for that car, thinking about weight and performance and all that.
For most folks out on the street, you're going to run with pretty much the standard tire size, maybe go a little narrower in the wintertime, a little wider for high performance applications. You know, in the racing world, out on the rally stages, you know, whatever you're doing out there, there's big differences with tire sizes. So this is just a primer. If you guys have any more questions about the wheels or about tread compounds and patterns and things like that, we can get more in depth with it.
Yeah, catch us on YouTube on the comments, or at Team O'Neill on Facebook or online. We're happy to answer anything you got.
If you're interested in coming out and doing some driving, check out teamoneil.com. Other than that, be safe.
I've been Dan.
I've been Wyatt. We'll catch you next time.
Ta-da.